All rise, veuillez vous lever. The International Criminal Court is now in session. L'audience de la Cour pénale internationale est ouverte. Please be seated. Veuillez vous asseoir.
Good morning. For the record, Mr. President, we are in open session.
Thank you very much. Appearances remain the same, I take it?
Yes, Your Honor, the same.
Your Honour, with one exception, at the back we have our trial support, Ms. Shalini Jairaj.
Mr. Katwa?
It remains the same, Mr. President.
And ours is the same.
Thank you very much. The testimony of witness 536 continues today in private session. As the chamber explained yesterday during its ruling, the witness would testify for the remainder of her testimony in private session. The private session is not, it needs to be explained, a secret session. The accused and their counsel will be fully privy to all aspects of the witness's testimony. The members of the public can see what's going on in the courtroom, but unfortunately will be unable to hear what's going on in the courtroom. And a public redacted version of the witness's testimony transcript will be released later so that members of the public can see to the extent possible what the witness had testified. The need to move her testimony into private session was necessitated by what was a clear and deliberate effort to intimidate this witness, a veritable psychological attack against the witness, comprising attempts to expose her identity, calling her very unkind names, and directing other manner of threatening language towards her. In these circumstances, the chamber felt it necessary to protect the psychological well-being of the witness pursuant to Article 68(1) of the statute. Prosecutor, can you give an indication of how long you anticipate, not testimony now, proposal for the public redacted version of the testimony can be done? How long do you think that?
Please bear with me 1 minute.
Thank you.
Would Tuesday next week be in order, Your Honours?
Can you do better than that?
Possibly Monday.
Today being Friday.
Yes.
Fair enough. Counsel, do you have any observations as to the lag time for the proposal of a public retracted version?
Well, Your Honour, it's actually not a difficult job. The transcript is done by the excellent transcribers that this court has. It's simply a matter of redactions. There are an army behind the OTP. I'm sure somebody in the back room can just blank out and redact. And in fact, it should be possible, given that we have breaks, for it to be done at the end of the day, to be quite honest about it. Your Honour, because one wants to look into next week, as well. So I would ask that the prosecution organise themselves so that public redacted versions are ready at the end of the day, or the very latest the next morning. At the very latest the next morning. Your Honour, the other possibility is at the end of every session, the bench may wish to give a synopsis themselves regarding what's transpired. Your Honour, that's the first proposal. On the second issue, we're not seeking to revisit the protective measures relating to this witness at all. But, Your Honour, with your leave, we'd be most grateful if Mr. Ruto can address the bench just for 2 minutes on this issue, because it may well inform the bench's decisions that are currently pending. Your Honour, he hasn't spoken on that issue. He'll only be a couple of minutes, but in my respectful submission, it would add to the deliberations that have to take place.
On what issue?
Your Honour, on the issue of the impact of the closed sessions and the balancing considerations that should be in mind by the bench as we go forward. So, Your Honour, it'll be quite a short statement to the bench. And, Your Honour, you will note yesterday he has never abused the permissions that the court has so kindly granted him. So I would ask that the bench allow the client to speak and address the bench for a limited period.
Mr. Khan, you know, the bench has been generous in allowing Mr. Ruto to address the court. But this is a matter that the chamber has ruled upon already. It is not necessary to hear Mr. Ruto on this one.
Yes. Well, Your Honour, the reason I raise it, it's not in relation to this ruling, as I tried to make clear. But in fact, the court has been kind in the sense of allowing Mr. Ruto to speak, but of course he has a right even to represent himself. And so it's a right that cannot really be curtailed. But, Your Honour, my point is a little bit different. It will not be an abuse of the court's time. The bench has a matter that is pending in which counsel made certain submissions regarding the need of protective measures. And in my respectful submissions, given that this case most directly affects Mr. Ruto more than anybody else, he's the person that this case is brought against, 2 minutes of the court's time is a very small price to pay. But, Your Honours, we're in the bench's hands.
Mr. Khan, the bench will not allow that on this occasion. Yes, Mr. Ruto does have a right to self-representation, but what ordinarily happens is when a party is represented by counsel, all representations to the court are made by counsel. So we do not have duplication of representation. But in this case, we have allowed Mr. Ruto from time to time to address the court. We'll leave it at that for now. Let's not debate the issue.
Your Honour, I won't say more. The only clarification I will give is this arises out of something that was said yesterday to Mr. Ruto. Your Honour, we've seen it already in this case. Sometimes things happen overnight, and they are matters that should be brought to the bench's attention. But, Your Honour, we're in the court's hands. But it does relate to matters and a conversation he had yesterday. And I thought it was matters that actually would help inform the judge's exercise of discretion in relation to an important pending matter.
We will not do that on this occasion. Thank you. Now, Mr. Steinberg, the proposal is that, and I don't think it's unreasonable, proposal that the prosecution should be able to make best efforts to produce proposals for redacted versions of the transcripts at the end of the day.
Your Honours, I think my learned friend's estimation that there are an army of backroom workers in the OTP is rather misplaced. I can confirm that there is no such army, certainly not available to this team. Could I ask that at least it wait until the following morning? It may require working late into the night. And apart from anything else, I'm the person ultimately responsible for these. I'd be reluctant to let them go out before I'd at least had a chance to cast my own eye over them.
So you've would make best efforts to propose public redacted versions the next morning after the test.
As court please.
Mr. Khan, I think we can accept that.
Yes, Your Honour. Your Honour, just one matter with your leave, and please indulge me. Can I just be very brief? The matter that I wish to raise is that Mr. Ruto spoke yesterday to his mother, who's 80 years of age. She doesn't know English. She doesn't understand English. And of course, she has been traumatized by the allegations against her son. And to be honest with you, with that generation, it's all rather confusing. Now, there's been attempts to explain what's happened. She's been following proceedings, and then suddenly the shutters come down, and she doesn't know what's happening. Now, there is a human face. We're not mechanical. It's not a mechanical process here. There is Her Excellency Mrs. Ruto and a daughter in court. There's a family back home, a recently graduated lawyer, a whole family, and they're all in the dark. Your Honour, just in relation to future matters, Mr. Ruto has endured being publicly named by Ocampo, a summons, and very serious allegations being made. In the exercise of discretion, Your Honours, I would ask you to consider that there is a real interest in Mr. Ruto having the allegations against him being made in public, and so that also the veracity of those allegations can also be tested. Your Honours, life is a gift of God, and we don't know how long this
Mr.
case
Khan,
will
I think
take.
you're really litigating the issue. The point I take from you is that there are interests outside the courtroom who really want to know what is being said by way of testimony. Is that not it?
Indeed, Your Honour, and also the point I was trying to say is that, particularly with the mother, who's 80 years of age, and of course Mr. Ruto wants to reassure his mother and that she has peace, that this is a son to be proud of, not a son to be ashamed of. And Your Honour, a decision may be rendered whenever. It could be 1 year, it could be more. As the trial unfolds, every person observing can make their own assessment regarding the veracity of the case. And Your Honour, that's the only matter that I would wish the bench to consider when deciding the pending application of the prosecution.
Pending application?
Your Honour, this uniform protection as we go forward.
Oh, fair enough. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Khan, for that. And for that reason that we're putting the extra burden on the prosecution to do their best to make sure that the public redacted versions are released as quickly as we can by way of their proposal, and then the chamber will, of course.
I'm most grateful, but
Yes.
Your Honour, in relation to that matter, a lot of people that are interested don't know English or French. Transcripts are produced only in those two official languages. And the advantage, if the bench wishes to give a summary, is the court staff, the court interpreters, will be able to translate that into a language that the public of Kenya understand. And Your Honour, that's why the bench may wish to consider that as a supplement to the full redacted transcripts. That's my only point.
That seems to me a useful proposal that the chamber will consider.
I'm most
Will
grateful.
consider that and see if there's any particular difficulty in doing that.
Grateful.
I wouldn't think there is, but we will
Your Honour,
need
can I
to.
just say, if it helps, I do know that other judges, for example, Judge Parker in the ICTY, whenever we went into closed session, when we came back, he would give a quick summary of what had transpired, just so that the public would even at least get a taste of what had taken place. I'm grateful.
We will return to you on that. As I said, it seems a reasonable proposal. We will. So on that note, we will now go into Mr. Keegan Katwa rose to speak.
Mr. President, The first thing I wish to say is I would very kindly request also for audience on issues as substantial as the ones which have just been dealt with in future, when the position of the defense is being invited. Kindly, Mr. President. Mr. President, the issue has been dealt with as between the prosecution and the first accused defense, and agreement has been arrived at that redacted transcripts can be available the following morning, and that's acceptable to my side. We would only pray on our part for a rider that the court maintains some amount of supervision of the reductions done by the prosecution so that they do not do it on their own in a manner that eventually conceals material that do not cause any prejudice to the witnesses and to their families. Mr. President, my client had also wished to have a word, and I don't know if you could afford him an opportunity. I noticed, Mr. President, that the chamber is very much alive to the concerns of the accused, and much as a ruling had been made yesterday, the fact that this morning the court needed to clarify that there is a distinction between a closed session and conducting proceedings in secrecy just underlines the importance with which this issue is the importance this chamber attaches to it. And my client was very anxious to say something about it. And I don't know if, Mr. President and the honors, you would indulge my client to say something on that issue.
Mr. Kinkaro, I'm sure you can anticipate what the answer to that would be.
I could. I just didn't want to presume. I presume you do not intend to allow me to. Mr. President, then allow me to just say his concerns. Mr. President, the first understanding we have, and I think it is accurate, is that the protective measures that have been given to have the proceedings in respect to this witness does not necessarily apply to the other witnesses. We, however, will pray that the proceedings are not conducted in a way, as it were, Mr. President, it is known that the allegations made against my client have been treated confidentially all along, to the extent that much as he may be aware of the case against him, he is not allowed to tell his family members, he is not allowed to tell his acquaintances, he is not allowed to tell anybody else. When these proceedings come to a point where they are also conducted in a closed session, then it means everybody who is aware that he's on trial doesn't get to know what are the allegations against him.
Mr. Kinkatwa, we have not come to the point of making a ruling on the protective measure of any other witness to the extent that we've done in the revised ruling on this particular witness. As we were at pains to explain, there were special circumstances attending this witness's appearance in court in the course of a testimony that necessitated the revision of the protective measures in relation to her. When we get to other witnesses, we will see what the situation is. It is hoped that there will not be a repeat of what happened to this first witness. That's all that can be said now. And in the ruling of the chamber will then depend on the circumstances presented in the future. But we're not there yet.
I'm obliged, Mr. President. Could I just say then, in 3 sentences, his concerns? The first thing, Mr. President, is that with all the words I can use, I am unable to describe the pain he's going through in the manner of the closed proceedings that have the effect of suggesting that he has absolutely no rights, Mr. President, in terms of having his situation understood by people who matter to him. and he would have really wished that these proceedings are conducted in a situation that other people can have audience. He prays that in the balancing act that this court applies to protective measures for the remainder of the witnesses, his concerns also be taken on board, including his psychological concerns. Thank you, Mr. President and Your Honors.
Thank you very much. And I apologize to you for not recognizing you earlier. That was a clear omission, Mr. Kigenkatwa.
I'm obliged, Mr. President and Your Honors.
Your Honours, if that concludes all preliminary matters, may I request that the witness be called?
Thank you. Yes, indeed. Court officer, we will now go into closed session to bring in the witness and then private session thereafter for our testimony.